The year is 1865. A new church has just been erected, and you and your family pay a visit, trekking up the hill from the village of Deanhead up to the fashionable Gothic Revival structure. Your family has prayed here for generations, and will continue to for 100 years more until 1969, when the village will be flooded in order to create the Scammonden Reservoir. Although the current church dates only to the mid-19th century, there has been a place of worship here in Deanhead for over 400 years. By at least the 16th century, there was a preaching cross on the site, a place for the villagers to gather round and listen to the sermon of an itinerant priest. Small villages, like Deanhead, often did not have enough money to finance the construction of a physical church structure. They would have to make do with a preaching cross in the meantime. Unfortunately, we can only guess as to the true location of the preaching cross in Deanhead. However, for visibility's sake, they were often placed at high points in villages. To argue that it was originally near to where the church is now is the most likely answer. According to Scammonden wardens, Deanhead was most frequently visited by preachers from Dewsbury, and the site of the preaching cross on top of the hill was locally called Cruxhill, up until the mid-1800s. In the early 17th century, around 1615, a decision was made to construct a church on Cruxhill. A deed written in Latin from that time establishes the benefactors as one William Robinson of Deanhead in the manor of Quarnby, and his son James Robinson. This 17th century chapel was probably built of wood and plaster, and lasted until the turn of the 19th century. In 1807, the curate of the chapel, Reverend John Marsden, resigned. His successor, Reverend Ralph Younger, noted the strain that the Pennine weather had had on this now 200-year-old structure, and he called together his parishioners and gave them the following proposition to pull down the church and build a completely new one. With the congregation's agreement, work was begun, and the new church was opened in 1812 at a cost of £1,000. According to accounts from that time, this new place of worship did not seem to be of much architectural value. It was a very small, barn-like structure, and a double row of seats often had to be put down the aisle in order to accommodate the size of the congregation. This church also did not last very long. 50 years on, in the 50s and 60s, the roof timbers had started to rot, and the walls were green with damp. Unfortunately, this period of the church's history coincided with the American Civil War. The industrial North depended on American cotton exports to keep its booming textile industry running. When the war broke out, the Confederacy placed an embargo on practically all cotton exports, creating a huge depression in the northern counties. While it was mainly the Lancashire area affected, weaving communities around the River Ryburn were victim to the repercussions of such an act. The then vicar of the church, Reverend Stephen Perring Lampen, appealed to his connections, one Dr. Walker of Sowerby Bridge and one Mr. Wheelwright of Rishworth, and managed to get the funds to tear the 1812 church down and build a new one in its place at a cost of £2,000. This is around £640,000 in today's money, and could certainly have gotten you an adequate village church back in the mid-19th century. This new 1865 church, consecrated on the 8th of July and dedicated to St. Bartholomew, was double the size of the old one, and built in a very tasteful Gothic Revival style. It is a Grade 2 listed building, with a few particulars I find interesting. You've got ashlar blocks, a steeply pitched roof, the roof's coped gables, and the lovely square bell tower with a crenellated parapet. This church has endured for longer than its predecessor, but not without freedom from threats. After World War II, plans from the 1930s to connect Yorkshire and Lancashire with a motorway were finally able to become reality, as we needed a quicker link between those two industrial powerhouses. At the same time, the growing population of the city of Huddersfield meant that more water needed to be supplied to the urban areas surrounding the Dean Head Valley. The solution to this two-sided problem? A two-sided answer: a highway reservoir system. The Dean Head Valley would be turned into a reservoir, and the dam to keep the water in would also serve as part of the M62 motorway that connected these two counties, getting rid of the daunting and annoying prospect of having to build a motorway in a valley. In the process, the village of Dean Head would be almost entirely submerged, and many buildings were demolished in order to make way for the dam. Thankfully, the church and the vicarage remain, despite the risk of slipping down the hillside into the dam. In 1970, a notice was even placed on the church door, warning that anyone who entered did so at their own risk, as the geologists working on the project considered the possibility that the foundations of the church would be undermined when the dam filled up with water. Despite the loss of its village, the village church has managed to keep afloat in recent times. I dare say that it has even managed to thrive. In 2002, the roof was restored, and in 2008, a £63,000 renovation project replaced the doors and completely restored the organ. I suppose there is always something to say, however, about the future of a village church with no village attached.